Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, panelists and audience members alike. As you settle into the webinar, I'll just say a few words of welcome on behalf of all of us behind the scenes here at ForSpace. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that Concordia University's ForSpace is located on unceded Indigenous lands in downtown Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Over the past 7 months, we've been continuing the work of building community virtually and producing events and other activities that are accessible, cross-disciplinary, interactive, and hopefully impactful. Working with Concordia's public scholars individually and as a cohort is a great pleasure for us at ForSpace, where we facilitate research engagement activities. And so we are very delighted to participate in today's exploration of Concordia's public scholar program. Before passing things off to Rasha, just a few procedural notes. This event is being recorded. It will be available on our website, concordia.ca/4 in the coming days. We are simultaneously live streaming to Facebook at CU Fourth Space. So we invite those of you following along there to please post any comments or questions below the video, and we'll address them here. For those of you here with us in the webinar, we've activated the chat for you, so feel free to write any supportive comments throughout, or any sort of commentary that might come up for you. However, if you have specific questions that you would like the moderator to address during the session, we invite you to use the Q&A proper so that we know it leads us to make sure we address your question. So it's now my great pleasure to get the ball rolling with an overview of the Public Scholar Program from Rasha Sheikh Ibrahim, Coordinator, Academic Programs and Development in the School of Graduate Studies. Over to you, Rasha.
Thank you, Anna. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As Anna mentioned, my name is Rasha Sheikh Ibrahim, and I have the pleasure to work with our public scholars. I just want to give you an overview about the program. In partnership with Montreal Gazette, the Concordia launched the Public Scholars Program in fall 2016 to showcase the value that our doctoral students bring to our community and greater society. Every year, through tough competition, we select 10 highly qualified PhD students from our 4 faculties to help them to develop key communication and public relations skills. These scholars are then prepared through developmental workshops and coaching to connect and share their knowledge with the wider community through a variety of means, such as including blogs, op-ed pieces, public presentations, and social media. We have begun seeking participants for the program for the 2021-2022 academic year, and we're really excited to discover new talents and innovations for the next year's scholars. This event is an opportunity for you to learn more about the program and ask your questions directly to our cohort before you apply and finish your application, submit your final application. I want to remind you that the application deadline is actually November 20th at 5 p.m. Today, we're joined with 8 members of our current cohort, a member of the 2018 Scholars Cohort, and representatives from Concordia academic programs and communication teams. We will start this event with a panel discussion that focuses on how PhD candidates can leverage this program to their advantage, followed by an open discussion and conversation with the scholars, and we do a final wrap-up at the end. Please note that the 2020 scholars are available to chat with you throughout the event. So please, if you want to chat, use the chat box as Anna mentioned. And if you have any questions, please post it in the Q&A throughout the event. If you have a question for a specific member, please make sure to include their name in your question, and we will try to address most of your common questions before we do the wrap-up. And now, let me introduce you to our 2020 participating scholars. We have Erica Pimental from GMSB Accountancy Program, Isabelle Gouillard and Bettina Forget, both from the Faculty of Fine Arts, Art Education, Kirolis Riyad and Marc-Andre Argentino, both from the Individualized or Indie Program, Hamid Ibrahimi and Ihsan Moghaddam, both from Gina School of Engineering in the Mechanical Engineering Program, and Sylvie Woulette from the Faculty of Art and Science Biochemistry Program. I would like now to start with our panel discussion, but before we do that, let me introduce you to our panelists. Our first panelist representing our current cohort is Erica Pimental. Erica explores how the accounting industry can leverage new and emerging technologies She has been extremely active in the public engagement, and she was selected as the Concordia Newsmaker for August 2020. From the 2018 Public Scholars cohort, we have Milan Valliere. Milan is currently a doctoral candidate in the Center for Studies in Behavioral Neurobiology at Concordia. And during his time at the program, Milan was Concordia's PhD winner for the 2018 3MT competition. And he also organized a conference at Dawson College to support gender diversity and encourage more women to join the STEM field. Peter Pavlik will be our academic program representative. Dr. Pavlik is a professor in the chemistry and biochemistry department, and he's also the associate dean for student affairs and postdoctoral studies at the School of Graduate Studies. Dr. Pavlik is also a supervisor to Sylvia Willett, the 2020 Public Scholars, who's also joining us today. And joining from Concordia Media Relations relation teams, we have Fiona Downey. Fiona is Concordia Senior Advisor, Public Affairs, and Deputy Spokesperson at Concordia. Fiona has provided guidance for the program since its inception, and she remains a key coach in the training workshop. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So I would like to begin the discussion by asking all of you please to share your thoughts about your experience so far with the public program, with the Public Scholars program. I'll start with Erica and Milan. Can you tell us about your experience so far in the program? Like, how has it impacted you when it comes to your research or career? I'll start with Milan.
Thanks, Rasha. When I first became interested in the Public Scholar program, I thought it was a great opportunity to kind of diversify my skill set and build my CV in a way that would make me attractive not only to jobs inside academia, but also outside. You know, I was engaging on Twitter, writing a blog, publishing an op-ed. And what I actually learned through that process was that these skills are highly valuable inside and outside of academia. So although I was interested in these skills because I thought they were widely applicable, now in my current position, I'm a postdoctoral researcher at McGill. I'm finding those skills still very useful.
Great, thanks, Milan. Erica?
Yeah, I mean, I think becoming a public scholar has made me fundamentally rethink what I want to be as an academic, like what kind of academic I want to be. And I don't just see this as a one-year training program. I see this as sowing the seeds for a career that's going to be based on looking outside the ivory tower, benefiting from the position that I have as someone with a platform and making constant connection with the real world. And when you think about engaging with this program, you have to decide how much or how little that you want to do, right? You could, you know, there's the minimum requirements, which as it says on the website, you have to do 5 blogs, an op-ed, a knowledge mobilization activity, and have 1 social media engagement a day. And you can do that. Or you can be like the Marc-Andre Argentinos of the world who are cited in Rolling Stone and New York Times. And I see myself somewhere in the middle of those two and have chosen to do more than the bare minimum. And it's been amazing. I mean, I've been on the radio with shows all across the country. I've had my stuff read 20,000, one of my articles was read over 20,000 times. My academic papers will never be read that often. So you see this immediate feedback in your work and makes you just rethink what type of academic you want to be.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Erica. I would like to pose the same questions now to Peter and Fiona. Since, can you share your thoughts and experience since you've been both supporter of this program? Go ahead, Peter.
Okay. Yeah, so I won't talk specifically about, well, we're going to talk more about Sylvia later on, so I'll leave Sylvia for now, but I have been involved in the Public Scholars program as well for a number of years now since I've served on the adjudication committee. And I have to say that that's been a really fascinating and rewarding experience for me because, you know, it really gave me a much better impression of just the richness of expertise and, you know, extremely high caliber graduate students we have across the university in all sorts of different disciplines and fields of study. Just the excellence in terms of communication skills as well. And yeah, it's just a super positive experience, and it not only really helps our students, obviously, but I think it also is fantastic for furthering the reputation of Concordia in the community. So yeah, it's great.
Great, thank you, Peter. Fiona.
I think one of the things that struck me from the get-go was that there was a kind of a demystification that was needed. There was a respect for media, but with some reservations. Not all media function in the same way as academics generally, and as well the perception of respecting that people are subject matter experts, but are they going to be bound in jargon, and how plugged into daily realities of our readership are they going to be? It was kind of the start point. And I think that you quickly dispelled that. And I think there was a curiosity from both sides and a real openness, a great generosity from our partner in the editorial team at the Gazette, and great encouragement. And I've really been very comforted. It's one thing for me to say, no, you can trust this person, can speak in plain terms, etc. But there's been great flexibility, great openness. So I think it's been very encouraging on both sides, building bridges.
Great. Thank you all for starting this conversation. My next question is for Milan. So can you comment a bit more on, since you've been the cohort of the 2018, how did the program help you to grow professionally? Like what skills, you mentioned skills before, like can you elaborate more? What skills did the program help you to develop, and how do they serve you today?
Thanks, that's a great question. This might sound a little bit strange, but I think one of the most important things I learned in the Public Scholar program was to be brave. As academics, as researchers, we're always trained to heavily scrutinize the facts and be cautious about our opinions. And so I always had this kind of voice in the back of my head that was like, be careful of what you say. And as a result, I was a little bit timid. But at some point, you can second guess yourself forever. At some point, you just have to come out and say what you want to say. And so then when I was thrust into this Public Scholar program, and I given all of this opportunity to tweet and write a blog and communicate an op-ed, I just felt obliged to be still careful, but confident and brave in what I was going to say. And so if I was going to give a piece of advice to someone wanting to go into the Public Scholar program, or just generally, I would say, be sure of yourself, be confident, and that'll do you well. And certainly I've now moved on to another, I stayed in academia, but I moved on to a new position. And I'm finding myself in this position being careful because I'm new and whatnot, but then at some point saying, I know what I know, I'm pretty sure about it, and being confident, being brave enough to communicate it.
Thank you, Milan. Actually, you touched on a very important thing, to be brave. If I can rephrase it, I hope that with this program, students will be able to have a voice, to talk more freely, to be more confident. You are all, as PhD candidates, are going to become or if not already, the experts in your field, but you need to communicate that and be confident in your communication. So hopefully through the training, through the different opportunities that the scholars have, this will give an opportunity for you to be more able to share with the public about your knowledge, about your expertise, because when we publish in academic journals, we're limited to the audience, to that specific audience. But the more people know about this, the more it increases the impact of the research. So having a voice is very important. Thank you for being confident. Having voice is very important. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
My next question is for Erica. Erica, as a current scholar, like you mentioned at the beginning, you said like it's up to you. You can decide to do the minimum, or if you want, you can do more and take advantage of that. What level of commitment do you think this program requires from PhD candidates?
Sure, that's a great question. And I think that'll allow me to answer some of the questions from the chat at the same time. Someone asked to explain what the program is before talking about its benefits. And I think that speaks to the commitment. So prior to your beginning your term as a public scholar, there's, correct me if I'm wrong, Rasha, 5 or 6 trainings that you have to do, and that prepare you for your role as a public scholar. So you get training on media relations, you get training how to write an op-ed with someone who's an expert in op-ed writing. You get a seminar Fiona gave us on how to tackle media interviews and things like that. We had another one on business networking. So you're given the tools for an extended period of time, let's say 3 months, before your program actually, your tenure as a public scholar actually begins. Now, as a public scholar, you're expected to, as I said before, do one knowledge mobilization activity. So you have to organize an event, which in the COVID area is more difficult. So many of us are doing them online. You have to write 5 blog posts that are published on the Concordia website, have at least 1 social media engagement every day, and write a minimum 1 op-ed for the Montreal Gazette. Now, that doesn't, over an entire year to do all that is not a whole lot. But when you think of how much each of us as public scholars are doing, I think we're doing much more than that because we're taking advantage of this platform. So I'm lucky that I'm in the last year of my thesis and things have lined up that I have some time to fill. So I'm doing much, much more. I try to write 1 article every month of some kind. That's probably more than you need to do. So you need to say to yourself, how many hours a week do I want to do this? Do I want to do 5 hours a week? Do I want to do 2 hours a week? Personally, I like to do at least 5 hours a week because I think that I really want to set myself up to continue doing this type of public scholarship once I start as a tenure track professor in June of next year. But I don't think it's not onerous because it doesn't feel like a job. It doesn't feel like a chore. It's something that I immediately feel satisfaction, immediately get feedback and gratification from. So it's something that if you want to learn, you will be taught. And if you want to do it, there are many opportunities and many different ways for you to connect with your academic community and the real world as well.
Thank you, Erica. And I just want to maybe highlight here, we have like certain requirements from the public scholars, like they have to write at least 1 op-ed, 5 blogs, and be engaged as in at least 1 knowledge mobilization. But also the program is very open so that if, let's say a public scholar comes like, I would like to do an event, but I'm not sure how, we can support them. So to be more creative, it creates, the more you want to put in, the more we can help you. But at least I would say, so average hours, I would say 5 hours. That's what you said, Erica, per week in terms of commitment. Okay, great. Thank you. So my next question is for Peter. As a supervisor of Sylvie, like how has Sylvie's involvement in the program benefited your research team?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. And I'll start with a more general overview of why this is all important and then focus in more on the specifics. And to start with, I wanted to pick up on something Milan said, which is really important, that academics tend to avoid the public spotlight. We tend to be very careful about how we express our studies and our findings and our research to the general public. And there's a tendency to shrink away from that because we're used to speaking to other academics, as you mentioned, Rasha, in terms of journal articles or whatever, right? And, you know, I mean, academia and academic research has become more and more specialized over time and more niche. And so that tendency gets greater and greater with time. And it's not good. And it's not good because, well, I'm in the sciences, I'm in the life sciences, biochemistry. And frankly, I think just look at the mess we're in with COVID, which I think in part is because scientists do not do enough public outreach, and therefore there's less of an engagement with the general public with science and the importance of it in terms of, say, virology or epidemiology or discovering vaccines or whatever. And because we don't have that critical link, right, with the public, and that involves exactly the sort of things that the public scholars program not capitalizes on, but teaches you in terms of the program, how to effectively communicate with the general public. It's super important, and we need to do a lot more of it. And so in terms of my own experience or the experience with my research team and Sylvie, I think, it's been fantastic. Sylvie is a, as you'll see when she speaks, is a natural communicator herself. So I think, the Public Scholar program is a perfect fit for her. And I was really happy to see, first of all, her getting accepted. Now, the fact that I'm on the adjudication committee, I will say I recused myself from judging Sylvie's application. So just so nobody gets any ideas there. But, I was just super happy to see that she got accepted. And the fact that my other, the other members of my research team could see what she's done so far in producing videos and editorials and blog posts, et cetera, I think it's been really inspiring. And it just underlines, the importance of this very critical skill to be able to communicate complex and specialized ideas to a general audience. We all need to do that, and all of us need to do that better. So, like I said, I think Sylvia was already kind of a natural at that, but I'm sure, as she'll say, the Public Scholars Program probably helped to hone those skills even further.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I think one of the most important skills that we try to focus on is communication and public relationship skills. And I always say that if we can all improve our communication skills, I think we can solve 99% of our problems. So with academia, we try to focus on communication, but to the specific audience, the academic audience. And what we're trying here with the Public Scholar is to give a chance to these PhD candidates to be more open to know how to talk about their research in a simple language that everybody can relate to. Thank you so much. I see some questions here in the Q&A, but I've for all the panelists, but I will first like to ask Fiona. Fiona, you've been involved with this program since its inception in 2016. What has inspired? You've seen a lot of scholars so far. What have inspired you the most about these scholars, and why do you think such a program is important to Concordia?
Well, I want to pick up a little on what Peter and the others have mentioned about the fact that your focus in producing, doing your doctoral work means sometimes you have to go deep and go narrow, and this is asking you to broaden out. And it's been amazing to see your readiness to do that, to sort of say, okay, hang on, I'm going to plug back into the wider world. I mean, this is what's meant by knowledge mobilization. It's so important in terms of getting funding. You're now asked, what are you doing to get to broaden out the reach of your work and explain the impact and consider the implications for wider society. And I think in the particular context that we're living in, as unfortunate as it may be, when the expertise of someone like Dr. Fauci is denigrated and there's fake news when coming from certain quarters, it is that much more important to step up and remind people that you are the ground that you're standing on and the validity of your credentials when you call yourself a subject matter expert. And it's hugely important to reestablish that. And I'd say there's among the wider public, whenever there's a question of what the belief is in the value of academia, there is a recognition that they are subject matter experts, you are subject matter experts, and you're important to those wider conversations in society. And I think what's been a kind of surprise is when we look at what's being asked of you, in addition to what you're already doing, is the delight with which many of you have responded to say, oh, it's refreshing to be able to turn around something quickly, to work on something more in tidbits, so that I didn't expect that there'd be that immediate validation in terms of the different direction that you're being asked to stretch in. So I think that's been tremendous. And let me just re-emphasize that the public needs to hear from you and is gratified when you are able to have, it's kind of, we're asking you to switch back into dinner party mode, and Lord only knows when we'll have dinner parties again. So join the wider dinner party conversation and think of it in terms of, what do you say to people on the street when you bump into them and you describe your work and you get those questions? It's really that's what we mean by demystifying what you're doing and explaining it in nice, broad, accessible terms.
Thank you, Fiona. Yeah, as you mentioned, it's very important for the knowledge, and this will be even more valuable for the public to know about the research, the great research that happens here at Concordia University. It's a great chance for us to inform the public about the great research that's happening here, and we can do it more through the public scholars, through the different channels that the public scholars use. I have a question. I don't know. I know that the scholars are answering some of the questions, but I've spotted one, and I would like to ask this to Erica and Milan. How would you describe being a public scholar in few words?
I'll take that one.
Okay, go ahead.
I would say that being a public scholar is being given a foundation of training upon which you're going to learn to communicate with the world about your research.
Okay, sure. Milan, do you want to add something?
Sure. It's an obligation to disseminate knowledge broadly, and I think being a public scholar or not, scientists should have that obligation.
Thank you so much. I actually like that. We do as scientists or scholars, we do have that obligation to inform the general public. Erica, since we talked about before about the level of commitment and in terms of training, and I've seen a couple of questions about wants to know more about the program. Do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something, because we're talking about all this communication that we're going to do as if it's easy to do. I remember before I became a public scholar, I wrote an op-ed with one of my co-authors, and he said to me, "It looks like an accountant wrote this." And I'm like, yeah, an accountant did write that. I had no idea about the journalistic flair required or the processes to even get something to the Gazette. And I remember one time this year, I was going to be interviewed by the Globe and Mail, and I was very nervous about this. And so Fiona and I had a conversation just outside the regular training. She was very available to me and said, these are the things you need to think about. You can ask them for instance, for the questions in advance, or you can poke around, see who's going to interview you. And so I feel that the program didn't just throw me into the deep end, but gave me the tools and techniques and a network of people that I can continue to access as I'm learning by experience of going through this process of connecting with the media and with people on social media as well.
Great. Thank you, Erica. I would like now to open the conversation with our current cohort. And I would like to maybe start with Sylvia. Sylvia, Peter talked about your involvement in the program. Can you summarize what benefit have you seen so far from your involvement as a public scholar?
Right. This is where I get to naturally communicate. Yes. As Peter pointed out earlier, and it was a coincidence, but it's uncanny that the start of our mandate came smack in the middle of this pandemic, and more than ever highlighted the need for us to bridge science and research and every aspect of what we do, because the 10 of us are really diverse, to the general public. And in my case, I already had an inkling of that. You see, I did my first degree in journalism at Concordia. I graduated several years ago with a degree in journalism. And since I had trained also as a lab technician prior to that, for many, many years, I was in scientific communications, bridging the two and orbiting around science. And then I decided at some point to hop back in and become a scientist. So whereas a few years ago, I was a writer writing about science, I'm now a scientist who's writing. And for the public scholar program, what it taught me is how to close the loop, as I said, because in journalism school, we were shown how to seek out and interview experts. And I think we have a nice example of that with Marc-André and the tremendous work and exposure he's getting. But at the same time, we cannot wait for journalists to contact us. Now we are able, through the public scholarship program and the training we've received, we're able to put ourselves out there and voice our opinions. For the first time, I had an opinion piece in the Gazette, and for the longest time, I never would have thought why would the Gazette be interested in publishing what I have to say personally? This was not a report. This was not me interviewing other people. This was me putting my opinion out there. And that for me was the first major benefit of the program.
Great. Thank you so much, Sylvie. Since you already mentioned Marc-Andre, I'll go and ask Marc-Andre, has there been a particular moment? Well, we know that there have been moments, not only one, that you were surprised that you've received interest from in your research as a public scholar.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting year. And even before I answer that question, I think one thing I'd say, I've had an experience that's very unique because of the world we're living in right now and my research being very relevant. But I don't think I would have survived mentally and emotionally if it wasn't for the public scholar program to actually support me through the magnitude of projects and interviews I've done this year. But I think the big surprise for me was a week in April after I had written a piece on QAnon as a public health threat that went viral. I had 500,000 people read my article, and that week I had received 42 requests from journalists to be interviewed and do podcasts and radio show hosts. And I remember just like reaching out to Rachel and Fiona and just like trying to figure out how to cope with the volume of content. And I think it was that moment I started realizing that this is going to be a very different year than I had expected. And no, it's a great program. I don't think anyone has to do the type of work I've been doing. But what I think is important and what I've realized is, especially because we're in Quebec, our education is funded by tax dollars. And even though the interviews I've been doing are international, we do have a responsibility as scholars in Quebec to give back to society. And I think that's the whole point, is trying to use my research and share it as publicly as possible to realize the extremist group I'm studying is becoming more of a threat. It's having an impact in Quebec because of how anti-maskers have been co-opted by this group, and realizing that, you know, this needs to be known by scholars and law enforcement and politicians. And having been able to have my research promoted this way through the public scholar program, it's also been a way that I've been able to have an impact. So it's not only the fact that I've had people come to me and, you know, ask me to do interviews, but then the consequence of that is platforms have approached me and asked me how to do with this. I've had politicians that come to me and ask, what should we do about this problem? And I think being able to have more than 12 people read your academic papers, but vulgarizing your research to have a benefit to our society is what the public scholars really offered. And I think that's the big realization. It's realizing that your research can have an impact beyond a traditional academic journal. And this doesn't go only for me, but, you know, the work that Erica and Sylvie and Bettina and everyone really does is being able to raise awareness about their research, and that there is more out there. You know, there's so much that I've learned from my own cohorts reading about their work that is fascinating. And that is the type of contribution you give to society. Because honestly, I might not have never heard of, let's say, Hamid's research if it wasn't for the public scholar program and having him put his stuff out publicly. And I think that's the benefit, is to showcase that this is amazing work happening and this is what your taxpayer dollars are actually paying for. And I think this is the real benefit.
Great. Thank you so much, Marc-Andre. Since you mentioned Hamid, maybe I'll ask my next question to Hamid. As a public scholar, what benefits, I'll address the same question that I asked Sylvie. What benefits have you seen so far from your involvement?
Yeah, I personally think usually we as an engineer work in our community and making tech-related methods, components by working with weird equipments, boring equation, which is boring for others, not for us. But the outcome will be interesting. And I found the gap between what we are doing and what people like to know about our work. And I found the public scholar was a place, gave me this opportunity to be trained by attending in workshops, public speaking, like 3T public events, and so on, and writing blogs. And it's good practice how to be prepared for communication with general public and other researchers from other disciplines, and even with engineers from other fields. Yep.
Great, thank you, Hamid. Maybe I'll ask our second engineer in the cohort, Ihsan. What benefits have you seen so far from your involvement with as a public scholar?
Actually, so far my experience in public scholar program was awesome. I received many benefits. For example, because actually joining to a public scholar, just I was working in the lab. But after joining to public scholar, now I can communicate with a wider audience. For example, by releasing videos from my research and releasing my blog. And when I share it in public, scholars, sometimes researchers send a message to me and like start a conversation with them. And on the top of that, I attended in training classes in public scholar. I received much information about that. For example, I learned how to present myself, how to present my project simply with a simple language. And on the other hand, how to capture public attention to my research. At the end, I can say public scholar was like a platform for me to help to share my research, to share the importance of my research and effect of it on the society. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ahsan. Isabel, let's switch a bit from the engineers to the fine arts. Can you tell us how did the program help you, or what benefits did you see so far as a public scholar?
Yes, I would like to say, like Marc-André said before, that it was a learning about what other scholars are doing was for me very enriching. The sharing of knowledge. I also have acquired confidence with this program. I have improved my writing and presentation skills as a French speaker. I received encouragement, support from people working in the training workshops, and feedback. And it also enabled me to reach people from different fields and other university, not just at Concordia. And I received very positive feedback about my op-ed and my blog post. So for me, was very, it was something really great.
Great, thank you, Isabel. I keep hearing communication, confidence, writing, presentation. It's all, this all goes back to the main two skills that we wanted to emphasize on in this program, communication and relation skills. My next question is for Kyrillos. Can you tell us, was there a particular moment that as a scholar you've received, or you were surprised to receive a lot of interest in your research?
Well, okay, I always thought my research was interesting, so I wasn't particularly surprised.
Sure it is.
But actually, the times that surprised me the most was actually a little bit before the scholars program, when I wrote my master's thesis, and that got published. And then I got somebody reach out to me who was writing an article in a 3D printing blog of some sort, which actually very famous. And so he reached out based on my master's thesis, and he asked me for an interview, and we did that, and he published the blog. And after that, that blog was translated in German. And this is when I started realizing, I was like, okay, it's not really boring engineering work. It's really something that's of public interest. And that's when I started, okay, well, maybe I should develop more of those skills. And I got very interested in learning about the public scholar program and getting all those trainings to be able to do this a lot better. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Bettina, can you maybe share with us also the same question? Was there a particular moment where you're surprised that you received a lot of interest in your work?
I think the biggest surprise was when I was doing my virtual residency at Fourth Space. So we do, as public scholars, also a knowledge mobilization. That means we organize an event or something where we can bring what we're doing, our research, to a general audience, and let them participate as well, and not just talk at them. And the Fourth Space offered us like lots of different ways of doing that. And because of the pandemic, They're wonderful actual physical space, but so they said, why not do this sort of online? And we worked something out that I can actually dovetail with my ongoing research as part of data collection. And I reached a really diverse audience through a presentation, and I did 2 workshops and a social media takeover. And I got so much interaction with people that I never thought would be interested in my subject, which is art and astrobiology. And, you know, I'm looking at how the fusion of art and science can maybe get more girls interested in entering the STEM field. So I'm in any case, very interested in connecting with policymakers and the general public and people who make decisions about this. But being able to have people attend my Mozilla Hubs event that were actually from academia, that were science researchers, that were artists and people from the general public, and they're all talking to each other, and I could listen in. That was amazing. So, and that wouldn't have happened without the Public Scholar program. So it's very exciting for me as well to participate.
Great, thank you, Bettina. Erica, do you would like to share also some of the particular moments where you received a lot of interest, your research received a lot of interest to the public program, public scholars program?
Sure. I think the thing is to remember is that I'm just an accountant. I'm an accountant, a lowly accountant. And I started writing about how the COVID-19 pandemic has caused professional work to change. The experience of being an accountant, a knowledge worker, someone in a white collar job. And I wrote this article on The Conversation. I got like 20,000 reads. I mentioned this before. And then I got calls to appear on the radio shows all across the country. And I felt like, who wants to listen to me on the radio? Like, why would they want to listen to me? And it happened once, it happened twice, it happened 3 times, it happened 4 times. And you start to realize, like, I really have a message that people are interested in. And it's tremendously rewarding. And so I think everyone's talking about how they take their little corner of the world and somehow transform it so that the greater public can be interested. If I can make accounting appeal to the world, then you can take your corner of research and translate it to the general public as well.
Great, thank you, Erica. I see I have like questions, so I'll try to address the questions from the audience. Please keep on writing the questions. The first question, if we can talk about the video component of the application, any tips from the panelists? And I see Milan, you've opted to answer this question. Do you want to comment on that? And I'll also open that to everybody else to share your experience.
I sort of did that by accident, but I will answer it. I know a few people that have been in the Public Scholar program, and I've seen a ton of different creative ways to produce application videos. Some people have lots of footage of them inside their lab, or if they do music with musical instruments and demonstrations. When I did it, I made a sketch video where I was drawing with a Sharpie, and you could only see the page, and it was describing the brain and how the brain influences behavior. So there's lots of ways to go about it.
Okay, great, thank you. Anybody wants to give also any tips about the video component of the Public Scholars application? I just wanted to give the audience a general idea. We're not going to be judging the video based on the production. Part of the requirement is that you need to produce it. It's how you communicate, how you can tell us about we want to hear from you, not only read your abstract, but if you get to explain your research, if we were having, as Fiona said, like a dinner party, how would you explain your research? That is basically the purpose behind that video component. I saw Kyrillis, you unmuted your mic.
Yeah, I was gonna say exactly what you just said. So yeah, I mean, it's not a production. It's just about speaking and being natural and being comfortable speaking publicly about what you're doing in a way that's smart people can understand, even if they're not experts in your field.
Great, thank you. Marc-Andre, did you have something to add or?
Yeah, I think the best way to approach it is think about this as an elevator pitch. You have a very short time to explain, something very niche, very complex to someone who might not be familiar with it. And it's really about practicing your communication skills. And it's not meant to be perfect, but you need to show the passion you have for your field, to show what's unique, what's contribute, why you want to take your work public, and what is the role of that. And it's really, putting that out there. I did mine on my cell phone in my office. It was not the greatest video quality, but it's really just about, record it, get your point across within that time limit, which is very difficult. Took a lot of tries. But again, it's part of the experience, and that challenge kind of puts you in the headspace you need to be to do this.
Great.
I like so.
Go ahead, Sylvie.
Yes, what I like to say, the best advice I can give is be yourself, be true to yourself. Above all, let us see who you really are and how passionate you are about your research. And as Marc-André just said, it's very much like an elevator pitch, and it's also very good practice for the 3-minute thesis competition, which is also a requirement of the program. So in a way, it overlaps, quite frankly, and you have, here's your, how can I put this, your opportunity to show your true colors and let us know about your research and how passionate you are about it.
Great. Thank you, Sylvie. Bettina, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everything everybody said, but since I'm the artist here, I would like to also point out, show, don't tell, use B-roll. And if you're in a lab or something, take a couple of shots, because 3 minutes are really short. And rather than explaining everything that you do, you can just show a picture of something that'll tell 1,000 words. So, consider also a little bit of how the visuals can support your message.
Great, thank you, Bettina. I see in the questions some questions about the if the eligibility, if you are can you apply or not. You need to be a PhD candidate. That means you've passed already your comprehensive exam and you're admitted to the candidacy before you're applying. And also, as you can see on our website, you need to be in the program. If you're applying for the 2021, 2022 cohort, you need to be in the program for the entire period as a public scholar. For more related for eligibility, I would love to address all your questions. If you can send it to me at public.scholars.program@concordia.ca. I will address all the eligibility questions. But here, I would like you to take that chance to ask your questions to in general about the program and the involvement of the scholars. Let's see. I've read one about the COVID. I was wondering how the program has adapted to COVID and whether you found that there has been significant loss or gain of activity of the program. I will address the administrative part, and then I will open it to the scholars to talk about their experience so far during COVID. So when COVID hits, when you apply to the program, we do the training during the winter term. So between January and May, we try to finish all the training. We did some of the trainings before, and when COVID hit, we moved all our training online. And at the end of the program, the cohort usually do a public event where we invite the public to talk, to have a one-on-one conversation with the public scholars, where they showcase their work, all the great work they've done throughout the year. We had to move that event. Unfortunately, all the events went online, but in general, the general administrative purposes, everything remained the same. Even working virtually, like when we did at Concordia, we adapt to the virtual environment. So in terms of, other than unfortunately having that one-on-one conversation, we're still having through the Fourth Space platform, all of the scholars are running events and having different opportunities to connect with the public. But I would say, other than having that, everything is going as normal, as usual. Anybody would like to, from this, Kiro, let's go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, one advantage of COVID is that you have a lot more time to write. So it makes it a lot easier to actually fulfill the requirements you had you had with public scholars in terms of writing op-eds or blogs or even doing podcasts or interviews, because you can do them from home and you don't have to go anywhere. The downside is that when you're in a team of superstars, you kind of want to meet them. So that part I missed, just getting to be with everybody else in the room and just meeting everybody. One part of public scholar I don't understand. I don't know the whole thing, but it's more being in alumni events and just meeting a lot of people to talk about what the university is doing. This part we have not been able to do so much, and it's a lot of things that I enjoy. But yeah, you have a lot more time to actually fulfill the requirements with COVID.
Yeah, and just to follow up on Carolus, although we're not running events, but we do have like a monthly meeting. We all meet together and just do it like a check-in, update on what's happening, whether for in life and in the Public Scholars program as well. So we kept our engagement, but of course we had to adapt it to the rules that fits within the rules of within Concordia's rules. Erica?
Yeah, I wanted to mention also that Fourth Space has been really, really helpful in this, because when I initially thought of a knowledge mobilization activity, I was thinking of something that would bring professionals together, especially about the blockchain sector. I was thinking about bringing people from different disciplines together. And instead, Anna from Fourth Space and Douglas came to me, and we're putting on this great event next month. I'm going to be working with another prof from JMSB. So there are resources at Concordia that want to see you succeed in your role as a public scholar, and not only you yourself, but making connections with other folks in the university. So I found that the administration of the program has been very helpful in having us adapt to this new reality.
Okay, great, thank you. We have around less than 10 minutes. So before time, I just want to go around and ask everybody, our panelists, our cohort, if you can give a quick one tip. I know a lot of the people in the audience are here because they're thinking about submitting their application. What would give them like a quick tip on how to prepare a successful application that's going to be accepted in the program? So I'll just go around my screen. I'll start with Marc-Andre.
That's a good question. I think the one tip I would give is, I'll give an example from Reddit. Like, think about how you could explain your stuff like I'm 5. It's how do you explain yourself to a 5-year-old? And I'm really thinking when I was looking at the applications of my colleagues in science, and they're fascinating projects, but being able to see how they presented their complex research in a very simple way while maintaining its importance and validity. I think that's the tip you have to do, is really try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's educated but not in your field, and how do you explain to them what you're doing, and then explain to it why it's important and why it should be promoted.
Great. Thank you, Marc-Andre. Erica?
You know what? I don't have any props in my research, it's just me talking. So it's hard for me to do a video with a microscope because it would be completely like disingenuous and not related to my topic. So one piece of advice is, if you're going to take a video of yourself, do it with something architecturally interesting behind you. So for me, I was on exchange at HEC Paris, so I did it on the Seine with Notre Dame Cathedral behind me. You won't have that opportunity this year, but try to find a place in your home or somewhere in your neighborhood that they're going to be looking at your face for 3 minutes, but that what's behind you doesn't look like what's behind me right now. It might be a little bit more jazzy, just something very practical to think of.
Thanks, Erica. Bettina?
I would say think about how to make your research relevant to the general public, because that's what the Public Scholar program is about. We're showing how what we're doing in academia has real life impacts for everyone and society in general. And I think if you can articulate that, you'll have a very good chance to be accepted as a public scholar.
Thank you, Bettina. Carolus?
I think the best advice that I can give anybody is to just apply. I think there's a lot of self-selections that happen where a lot of people feel that they are not smart enough or they don't have enough confidence. And look, if you're already in a PhD candidate stage, you are smart enough. And usually what happens is people don't have the confidence. And so if you go through the application process, just do the video, you already have a very good chance. I think the biggest reason great people are not necessarily part of, miss out on these kind of opportunities is just you don't apply. And so this is the best advice I can give. Just apply, just do it.
Great, thank you, Carolus. Isabel?
Yes, I would say defining your goals, what you want to accomplish as a public scholar, and maybe try to be concise about why your research is important, and try to make it accessible and engaging. So in my case, I really had to practice, but it was very simple. It was simple, but it was clear, and it was I think it was very well structured. And yes, I think that's my advice.
Thanks, Isabel. Sylvie? Can you unmute your mic?
Sorry. If you're thinking of applying, I think the application process in itself is quite revealing, because what you have to put out, the video introducing yourself, your letter of intent, and putting it all, packaging it all together, I think will tell you right away if this is for you, and at least go through the exercise, and you might find out a lot about yourself that you didn't suspect was there before.
Thank you, Sylvie. I totally second that. Go through the exercise, apply, go through the application, and see, even if you're not eligible, at least, well, if you're not eligible, don't submit it, but you learn more about yourself and about your communication through the process. Ehsan?
Just I want to mention 2 points. First of all, when I want to fill out the forms, please don't use technical expression, because you're going to be public scholars and you have to communicate with public. And another that when you wanted to explain your project, I think you have to have a nice structure. It means, for example, you have to know where you have to use methodology of your project. Then you have to mention the problems and how your project can solve this problem. I think these points are important.
Okay, great, thank you, Ehsan. Hamid?
To me, it's good to be ready to present for the public, general public. No need to use the complicated things, but don't forget to talk about your contribution in the PhD, and good to present some tangible application of your research as well, I think.
Great, thank you. Milan?
Everyone's given such great advice. I'll share a piece of advice that was once given to me, and I think it's applicable to public speaking, communication in general, and when you're making the video. Have a strong open. That's when you're gonna grab people and bring them in. Lots of people at the beginning of talks will say, oh, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. I gotta do this, that, whatever. Just don't say anything until you start. And when you start, really start.
Thanks, Milan. Peter?
Yeah, well, I guess having sat on the adjudication committee, just a couple tips about the videos. We have to go through a lot of videos. So you really want to, just to build on all the tips you've heard already, be creative. You have to work within the constraints of the guidelines for the videos themselves, but you really need to grab, your audience at first to be selected is the adjudication committee. So you want to grab their attention as soon as possible. So yes, the start of the video is very important in terms of, engagement. You need to be polished. So yes, you should practice, but don't over practice, because you also have to be natural. You have to be yourself, etc. Avoid jargon, and just don't sit there and read off a script, because that's not going to cut it. Yeah.
Great advice. Thanks, Peter. Fiona?
I'll just give a very quick pitch for social media, which I think a lot of us, when we first hear about it, we think of it as some great sort of mud wrestling pit of horrors and abuse. And somebody did raise the question, what happens if I do get blowback? We have a social media team who's there to help you and guide you along. and support you and advise when it's best to engage and not. But if you can get a little familiar with the platforms, if you're there to elevate the conversation within those platforms and to bring your expertise to bear, it gives you that opportunity and will support you through that. So just get a bit of a sense of what you might want to do with social media. I think most of us have found there's a way to live comfortably with it and take advantage of how it can empower you.
Thank you, Fiona. I think we've reached to the end of this program, this event. Time passed very quickly. I just want to thank you, everybody. Thank you, our panelists, our participants, and our audience. Thank you all. We look forward to, I hope that you've learned more about the program in the last hour, and I look forward to receiving your applications. You can send me any questions related to the program or the application to public.scholars.program@concordia.ca. And just to remind you that the deadline for the applications is Friday, November 20th at 5 p.m. And if you want to learn more about the program or what it offers, you can always visit our website, concordia.ca/sds/public scholars. And if I just want to say, go through the application. It's a great process to learn more, but please submit only your application if it's full. This program is a great opportunity for all of you. If I could just summarize it in a couple of words, it helps you to be brave, gives you a voice. This is what I've heard from everybody. It kind of closes the loop for your work, voices your opinion. It's part of, as a public scholar, you kind of fulfill your responsibility to educate the general. Your research will have higher impact. It will be higher impact not just by publishing it in the academic journal. You learn more about your research and the research that's happening here at Concordia, and it helps you a lot to build your communication and public relations. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to hear more from you. If you have any questions, you can direct it to us at our email. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Rasha. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciated working with you on this event. Great to see Milan again. Peter and Fiona, thank you so much for your insights. All of the current cohort, we've really enjoyed working with you. We look forward to continued projects as they're developing. And for the next cohort, we look forward to meeting you next year. On that note, thanks very much, everybody. Big waves, and enjoy the rest of your day to all. Okay, bye.